Just 1 second here.
All right.
All right, we are live streaming. So Eben or Walter, take it away.
Well, Evan, you want me to do it this
Walter,
time?
I'll start. Yeah, go ahead, Walter. You start.
All right. Well, just want to welcome everybody to our joint cybersecurity and PMBR committee meeting for this October meeting of the State Bar. I want to remind everybody of our ethics statement. It's the duty of committee members to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflicts of interest in performing the duties as a member of the PMBR and cybersecurity committees and the North Carolina State Bar. Any member of the committee who's aware of any personal conflicts or appearances thereof with respect to the matters before this committee should disclose those at the meeting. Are there any conflicts that need to be disclosed at this time? All right. Well, thanks so much. I know y'all got an annoying email from me about a week ago warning you that the meeting time was coming up, and we were hoping to get some reports from our subcommittee and look forward to hearing from you guys today. But I guess the first order of business after our welcome and introduction is an approval of the committee minutes that were prepared. I guess Leonore, you get the credit for doing this work, right? Other than not Brian. Okay. So do I hear a motion on approval of the minutes that were distributed to each of you?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye or raising your hand. Okay, I'll note we've got unanimous approval, except Ted Edwards is objecting, I think. You objecting, Ted? All right, thanks so much. So I wonder if we can move on right quickly to the reports of our different working groups. As everyone knows, we were all asked to indicate our preferences for a working group to put together a program for this PMBR experiment, and we've divided up into subcommittee working groups for communications, money, information storage, staff awareness, office culture, cyber attacks, and marketing. And unless there's somebody who needs to report and get off the call early, I'll just ask that we go and take these in order. That's all right with everybody. Okay, so is there some spokesperson been appointed for communications to tell us what you guys have been doing and how things are looking?
Walter, as I look through our list of participants, I don't think we have a representative from the communications working group with us right now. So maybe we can hold that one and see if anybody joins later.
Yeah, I see you're right. All right. Move on to the next one, subsection B, money.
Good morning, everybody. I think I was tagged as it, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, so with money, it was me, Rich Costanza, and Judge Hennett, and we were able to communicate back and forth via email and come up with some ideas for the best management practices for money. And we did it for both the trust accounts and the general account. I can just give you a brief rundown of the things that we came up with. That lawyers should read the section in the Lawyer's Trust Account Handbook regarding trust account management on an annual basis. There should be written fee agreements for every case that comes into the office, notating the payment amount, whether it's partial or full, and make sure that there's a paper trail and that receipts are kept. Maintain a receipt book for all payments made in cash or by check, and keep a ledger for credit card payments and differentiate between trust payments and general payments. Segregate the payments when they come into the office, and notate who the payment was made for by. Notate on that the deposit slips as well as the files. Only one employee other than the attorney should receive payments and account for them. An employee should log the receipt, just one, outside of the attorney, and reconcile those funds with an attorney before the deposit is made. And place payments in a singular storage location. Make bank deposits on at least a bi-weekly basis. They should be made daily or the next day if possible. Keep a safe in the office for receipts and as well as checks, and that are only accessible by an attorney. Use a software to manage financial accounts or have an accountant. Do monthly and quarterly reconciliations, and monthly should be the standard, and that definitely is with your trust account. Stay abreast of internet fraud trends. Avoid wire transfers, or at least follow specific instructions that are given for the transfers. Know your staff. Be aware if any of your staff may have any issues that could lead to money disappearing, and limit the staff that comes into contact with money or have signatory authority on checks. Make sure all checks and credit card payments clear before dispersing any funds. And read and on an annual basis the Good Funds Settlement Act, and make sure to dispose of client credit card information in a secure manner. So those are the things that we came up with. I don't know if anybody else, if either Judge Hennett or Rich, if you want to add to it or have anything you want to say about our points.
No, that was what we agreed upon.
Okay, so that's our report for money.
Okay, in what focus what specifics are you recommending that go into this self-assessment tool that specifically focuses on the issue of cybersecurity? What did y'all discuss about that? And you know, we're talking about self-assessing our office practices. What are those that you recommend and would propose to include in the self-assessment tool dealing with, you know, money and financial transactions?
I would think a lot of them, because I know in my practice, we do a lot of things, you know, with the computer, even credit cards, and even with cash and checks, we always keep a record of it on the computer as well. So we have a paper copy and we have a copy for the computer and on the computer. So I think like all of that would be necessary if you're kind of operate the way that we operate, that all of those things would be, you know, necessary just to make sure that you're keeping your records with, if you have them on the computer.
So Takia, what I'm hearing is, you know, in terms of translating this into an interactive self-assessment tool, you know, I think we can take those issues and turn them into questions and say, you know, if you're doing this, are you doing this? Yes, if no, and then another drop down about, you know, what to do if you're not doing it correctly, and also a link to any kind of source outside of the self-assessment tool that can be used to educate lawyers. Is that kind
Right.
of the way you're looking at it?
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Hey,
Eben and Walter, this is Barbara, and I would think you might draw those questions straight out of the trust account handbook and the Good Funds Settlement Act and things, and so that we're not creating any new policies here. We're just making sure that they are aware of the policies. It could be you could also draw them from some of the ethics opinions that deal with some of these things. I mean, there'd be a lot of sources, I think.
Right. Any other questions for this group? So, Takia, what have y'all thought about for your subgroup on the next steps to moving this from the concepts that you've talked about into a self-assessment?
I think we're probably still going to be working on the next steps. I can, ask my other subcommittee members if, they agree, but I think that we're still working on next steps.
Okay.
I would agree. We were basically trying to get talking points that we could agree on and have this committee to evaluate, get some more eyes and ears on what we thought might be the top aspects of handling money in the law firm. So as Evans so wisely suggested, we can put them in the form of questions that, and I think that was Barbara, that are consistent with the governing documents.
So y'all seeking feedback from the group, folks? Patrick, you live this world. What thoughts or suggestions might you offer?
That's a dangerous question, Walter, especially after the document I just sent you a few minutes ago, if you opened it. That's something that I think our group was, the cyber attacks group was hoping for feedback as well regarding is, how many questions do we want for each of these topics to be able to really focus in on those key points that are going to be broadly applicable, keeping in mind that someone like me may have a lot of comfort with technology, someone else may not have as much. A large firm may have more resources than a solo that doesn't even have a physical office location. And so trying to keep things as general as possible while still hitting on main concerns. I don't want to jump ahead. Where we started was trying to identify the 3 or 4 biggest pain points or biggest concerns that we saw with cyber in our area. And then we developed just a whole bunch of questions similar to the way they did as well. And I think everyone probably did that. And they need to be narrowed down. Ours need to be narrowed down. I don't want to speak for anyone else. But yes, I think it was Mark Twain is credited with saying, if I'd had more time, I would have made it shorter. But starting from a broader point and trying to get general questions that address those biggest pain points. Like I think with money, wire fraud has been a huge topic for a long time for the state bar and for attorneys. Trust accounts getting hacked. I don't have the citation off the top of my head, but the ethics opinion, I think it's a 2015 ethics opinion that has the safe harbor sort of provision in it that if you had reasonable protections in place and your trust account gets hacked and drained, you don't have to put the money back right away. But if you're a victim of wire fraud, you do. Looking at things like that to draw, if people have had good controls in place, if they have a plan to deal with a potential loss of that money, or at least controls that will help reduce that, whether that's dual authorization for wires or large checks, or something to have an extra set of eyes. We're still seeing the certified check scams coming in. That's not really cyber related, but those dual controls can help in a number of scenarios.
you know, you just raised one thing that we might want to consider for each of these. And Takia, for yours, he just mentioned the ethics opinions that came out about hacking trust accounts or the wire fraud issues. And obviously we have a lot of wire fraud cases come through the grievance committee. And so perhaps we should consider in this self-assessment tool calling attention to any specific ethics opinions that we have on the topic of the protection of client money, and some of it is generic enough to apply equally to the cybersecurity as to general security of funds. Evan, did you have any other thoughts on this one?
Yeah, there's a subcommittee on the ethics committee that's looking into the counterfeit check issue. And it looks back to that 2015 ethics opinion that Patrick referenced. It's still sort of in the bosom of the committee. We're working through it. But basically, we looked back at the 2015 opinion, and that opinion says that as long as a lawyer fully complies with all of the rules of trust accounting, that it's really not a grievance or a grievance committee violation. It does not make the lawyer immune from civil litigation from the clients that may have been injured by it. But the specifics of that particular inquiry into the ethics committee was whether or not the lawyer complied with the due diligence requirements in terms of the red flags that appeared in the front end of the case and in the middle of the case and in the distribution of monies on the case. Fortunately for that lawyer, there was a very savvy bank person in Japan who caught the fraud and was able to stop the counterfeit check from going through, and it was $300,000. And so fortunately for that lawyer, he wasn't injured in his trust account. But I think that opinion will come out here in the next quarter or two. There's sort of a debate whether or not it's really in the ballpark of ethics and whether it should stay in grievance. So we're working through some sort of procedural issues on that. But I think that the overall consensus of the subcommittee is that a lawyer has to do a number of due diligence looks and look backs and inquiries and look for red flags. And that particular opinion may be one of sort of the drop down questions, identifying those red flags in this self-assessment tool. I think it would be very, very helpful for lawyers. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Patrick.
Any other feedback for the money group? Eben, you ready to move on to the information storage folks? That suit you?
Yeah, I'm ready. As I told Brian, my partner's covering for me in federal court, and so they scheduled me at 10:45 today, and I thought this committee meeting was important enough that I got my partner to cover me. So I'm good. So okay. I'm ready to move.
Okay, and who's the spokesperson for information storage crowd?
Can you hear me, Walter?
Yeah, Jared.
Hello, everybody. By virtue of being the only person from my committee that's here, I reckon that I am. The ace in the hole for us on this committee is Brian Fox, who has about a couple of 1,000,000 times more knowledge than I do about cybersecurity and information storage and infrastructure. I'm not even totally certain I understand what infrastructure means in terms of cybersecurity, but I guess that's something that we'll have to work through more in the future. Catherine Sanders Reach, Brian Oaten had originally told me that she was going to be out of pocket for a month or so. So up to this point, it's mostly been Brian Falk and myself who have discussed this subtopic. The things that I'm going to present today, as all of you who know me well will already know, the things I'm going to present today are mostly Brian Fox ideas. And I'm going to be trying to tell y'all what he has told me the best that I can do that. And I'm a poor conduit at best. But basically the first thing that Brian said, what I did originally was to try, Eben, without a very good knowledge of PMBR and how the question process works. I tried to just take our subtopic and off the top of my head, create questions that I thought might deal with information storage and infrastructure. And so when Brian and I spoke and I ran those by him, he patronized me to a great extent and said, yes, those are great questions, which of course they probably weren't. But he said that perhaps we didn't want to be so granular, and that what we really want to do is to try to look at the overview and the broad view of these subtopics in terms of cybersecurity. And Brian said that it's very difficult to break cybersecurity down into subcategories because there's lappage amongst many of the categories. He said that it was best to try to start with broad questions, and in the PMBR to try to have the people taking the self-assessment to be able to work their way through the broader questions before you got down into the specifics. Pretty much everything that I had tried to come up with question-wise was all specifics. And in terms of overlap, he said that the information storage and infrastructure would clearly overlap with the broad topic of cyber attacks that Patrick, Ted, and Alan will be working on. And one of the things for information storage, he said, had to do with levels of access to the storage within the firm, and that that you have to look at it in terms of a need to know kind of a thing. And so that firms would need to be trying to think through who has access to clients' information, and does everybody in the firm need that access? And of course, that will overlap with the with Mac and Mel and Dorothy's subtopic of staff culture and awareness. And then he also said that the communication subtopic would clearly overlap with the information storage and infrastructure. Brian said that the three basic categories of questions, Eben, that we would want to try to ask would be to ask them, what information do you have? And the second basic category is, where is your information kept? Which I guess is the storage part of it. And the third information is, how is that information secured? Which clearly overlaps with Patrick's subtopic. In terms of what information do you have, he said that's where Rule 1.6C would come into play on confidential information and the duty to keep client information or access to client information to keep it secure. and that you then have non-public information, and then you have public information. And so he felt like that a series of questions, which Takia, we're not yet to either. And because I know Walter is going to ask me, what do we see as our next steps? And Walter, we've still got some work to do. But in terms of asking questions, I think Brian's concept is to try to start with those three basic categories and then try to develop each of the more, as he says, granular subtopics from there. Is very interesting. I'm learning a lot. And it really does. I hadn't thought about this before, but it really does show me that there is going to be a lot of overlap in what we're doing. I think even in Takia's presentation on money, that gets back into information storage. And one of the things that Brian said that I thought was very interesting is that if you were an internet hacker and you wanted to steal people's information in order to eventually get at their money, one of the primary people that you would try to reach would be their lawyer, or in a divorce case, their opposing attorney, because he said there's treasure troves of information about people that lawyers hold, and financial information and money is one of those. And as he said that, I thought about our cases where we've got numerous financial documents, and all of us do that do litigation. But that's sort of the overview that he had talked about. Under some of those more granular specific questions in terms of information storage, is what type of hardware you're using, maybe. Is your hardware connected to the internet versus via hardwired connection, or via Wi-Fi? If it's Wi-Fi, what type of router do you have? What level? If it's Wi-Fi, do you have separate Wi-Fi with passwords and encryption for the firm versus Wi-Fi that you may have for guest Wi-Fi for your clients? Do you use a VPN to connect from a remote location? Do you use a VPN to connect from your primary locations? There's even questions about what kind of internet service do you use, who your ISP is. Do you have your own dedicated website? Are you on something like Microsoft Exchange? What email server do you use? What efforts do you make to protect your devices from being lost or stolen? Do you use flash drives? Do you have mobile devices with client information on it that you're taking out of your office? And do you leave those devices in the back seat of your car when you go in to I live in Murphy, so when you go into Walmart, that's the number one retailer in our store, in our town over here. But several of those more specific questions like that, Evan, that maybe Brian said that you would then try to fit those kind of questions under those broader categories. And once again, I've heard Patrick speak several times, and I've maybe soaked in 0.1%, Patrick. But I can very much see how our topic very much overlaps with what y'all are going to be talking about too. Evan, I'd like to say that from the PMBR standpoint, I felt a little bit insecure with regards to being able to design questions, because I don't have a great feel for what we're talking about, drop down boxes and those kind of things, as to how that would work. And I think maybe, at one time when we had a general PMBR presentation that we did for the full council that time, We looked at, I think maybe Colorado, and we looked at the way they did their questions. It may be that for our subcommittee, we'll try to get from you maybe some more examples of how these questions have been physically set up to be able to do that too. I'm sort of a tangible kind of guy, and that I think for me that would help me.
Yeah, I don't know if, you know, the wordsmiths on this committee are Catherine Fry and Warren Savage and Patty Head. So I think that, you know, they're the ones that I think have been identified as the most skillful wordsmithers here. So I think what I have in mind too is once we get kind of a rough draft of these questions, that we'll pass it around to all the committees and identify the overlaps. And I really, you know, I do see the overlaps, and I really see one self-assessment tool if it's going to work.
Looks like
Got him.
I still want this to be work.
looks like we're losing Evan. You're
Am I breaking up?
there. You go.
Okay.
That's back.
All right.
Yeah, I think this overlap is it's good to bring that to everybody's attention, because we separated into different working groups. I don't think I ought to suggest that we're going to have separate sections to the assessment tool. And given the overlap, I think what we're really accomplishing with the working groups is focusing on specific areas that we want to make sure we cover that are critical to the whole concept of cybersecurity. And then I think we had talked earlier about once we come up with our specific questions, maybe circulating those to the next working group, and in that process, maybe hone all this down to some workable questions that are at a level that we think is appropriate for this first venture into PMBR, which is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, it can always be supplemented later on. You know, I think what we want to do, if we can get a workable product out there that is, you know, that is available to be supplemented.
Thank you, Jerry. Other input on or questions for Jerry and on this topic?
Later.
Walter, if I could just offer a quick thought about the overlap. I think it's great that we are seeing that these different topics do overlap. That's I think there's a lot of it out there, but I also feel like we will, by each of these groups individually drafting these questions, we're going to start seeing where both groups are asking the same question, and that very well may point out that's a great question to ask. So I think I would encourage the working groups to, as much as you're going to see, gosh, we might be overlapping with someone else, maybe just kind of forge ahead and really, when we see a couple of working groups asking the same question, that really may highlight to us the importance of that question, and where it goes in the self-assessment, we can kind of work on. But I think trying to sort out the overlap right now may be too big of a task. But I think that actually is a good thing if people are asking the same question.
Yeah,
I didn't really think that we could work out the overlaps in advance, and I agree 100% that each subcommittee would just do their questions, and that'll be for somebody between PMBR and cybersecurity to try to hone it down for sure. Two other questions right quick that Brian mentioned, being as he understands this and deals with it a lot more than I do, is the questions about, do you have a secure portal so that clients can send and receive documents securely? Out here in Murphy, North Carolina, I'm not certain that that's a topic that lawyers have in their minds very much right now. And secondly, do you have secure messaging for secure email encryption, that kind of thing? Brian was really big on encryption, which once again goes back to Patrick's subtopic also. But we obviously the PMBR aspect of this is really important, and cybersecurity. I think y'all did a great job in pairing the two together. Because this is a great way to try to get this information out to attorneys. And if we just simply passed an ethics opinion or some kind of rule requiring this kind of thing, we might not have near the effectiveness that the PMBR could really do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. Any other questions or comments on information storage group? Okay, how about let's move into the next working group then, the staff awareness and office culture. Who's going to give us a report on that?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mike, fire away.
Our subcommittee chair, Dorothy Harrison Mitchell, is a professor at North Carolina Central Law School, and she is teaching at this hour. So I am the committee. I will say that I could probably say nothing and have given our full report, given two things. First, we thought we were supposed to identify broad topics, not write questions. So like the other folks, we have not written, some of the other folks, we've not written questions. And the second thing is that almost everything we identified and talked about was covered by the Money Committee, Information Storage, and Cybersecurity. But what little bit wasn't covered by them, we'll see if we can get in. Our thoughts on the staff issue were basically around a training assessment. First off, not training is, are you doing background checks on employees who are going to handle money? Then the rest of the concerns were around training. Are you training the employees who handle money about all of the issues that go with trust accounts? Are you training your staff on confidentiality? Are you training the staff on communication issues with clients and within the office? And then on things like the wire fraud issue, the sort of things that staff could identify and be the first line of defense for. On culture, what we were looking at was an open office culture where information is freely shared in service of serving clients. And then the questions would be, is the attorney or the attorneys setting a high ethical standard for the office? Are they making sure that their attorneys understand, their staff understands that details matter? And then an issue that another committee of the bar is talking about, and that is there an attitude of non-discrimination and equity in the way we treat other lawyers, court supervisors, our clients, the community, that there needs to be a sense of non-discrimination and equity being put forth as the office culture. I think the next thing we would say is, having not understood completely the assignment, our next task will be to put those into questions.
All right, thanks, Mac. Questions or comments? So it has become clear to me that we were not perhaps clear enough in defining or trying to define what we would like as next steps, you know, as committee chairs, and we'll work on that, because I don't want to leave you guys in the dark as to what we're trying to do, and maybe when we get finished today, we can all talk together about making sure we're all in agreement and understanding about next steps and is what that would look like as a
Thank you.
practical matter.
Hey, Walter,
I'm much
Walter,
happy.
can I weigh in for
Please.
a second?
Yes.
I just want to express my sincerest appreciation for everybody. This is a heavy lift and it's a lot of work, and this is a strange time we're all living in. It's almost like we're living in a fog almost. And so I just want to express really a deep appreciation for everybody's hard work and continued commitment to get this thing right.
I mean, we are plowing brand new ground for all of us. So I appreciate everyone's patience about this too.
And Chairman Brock, I appreciate you making it plain that this was your fault and not mine. Thank you.
Glad to do it. All right. So any other feedback then whose fault this is? Our questions for Mac. All right. Well, thanks so much, Mac, on that. We'll move down to cyber attacks and hope we don't have any more during this session. Somebody's been messing with Evan's connection there, but I hope that was not a Russian attack, Evan. But, so Patrick, are you going to speak for the cyber attack group?
Sure. And on who to blame, I usually blame Peter Bolak, and he's not here, so that's as good a place to start as any. Mac, one thing that you guys may want to look at also is user awareness training. Just 5 minutes a month or quarter to go through recognizing phishing emails and whatnot. I put an article on Lawyers Mutual's site back in July about building a culture of security that may or may not be helpful. There's a lot out there though. Trying to train users is, the humans are always one of the weakest links, which is a great segue into cyber attacks. Judge Cobb and Ted Edwards and I are on that group, and we had a good call and exchanged some emails. And we started with trying to identify some of the biggest areas of concern broadly. And those that we came up with were wire fraud, phishing, and ransomware. And then some additional concerns around insider threats. That's employees, whether it's malicious, where somebody is stealing information from the firm or stealing money from the firm, or if it's accidental through an error, such as clicking on a phishing link, or like we just saw with the University of South Carolina, where the dean emailed everybody everyone's bar exam results that were confidential. Stuff happens. And we also looked at some of the primary areas kind of to focus on helping, and that's things like Jerry mentioned, using encryption. That way a lost or stolen device can't be read. Properly disposing of office equipment, so dumpster divers can't get access to the information. And then trying to prevent hacking using good passwords, strong passwords, multi-factor authentication. I talked with an attorney this week whose Office 365 account managed to be compromised, and people started sending out emails from it. Doesn't appear there were any client confidences compromised based on how he used that account, but it happens a lot. Last year, a group developed a computer that could guess 100 billion, that's with a B, passwords per second. And these are the types of machines that hackers are using. The penetration companies that we use to test our systems have built smaller machines that guess 6 billion, again with a B, passwords per second. So it's not just somebody trying to type one at a time and figure out how to break in. I'm not going to go through all of our questions. We ended up coming up with a few categories of assessment questions around physical controls, network controls, authorization and authentication, vendor or third-party risk management, software, including updates, versioning, end of life, that kind of thing. Testing and monitoring is a big thing. The ABA's ethics opinions mention that attorneys have duties to detect that there's been an attack. So being able to have something in place to monitor your systems so you can see if there's been an attack and respond accordingly. Having written policies, both for internal use and to help you respond in the event of whether it's a disaster or an attack, are important. Looking at what reasonable is, and there's a balancing test, and I think it's comment 19 to rule 1.6 here in North Carolina. The ABA also talks about it in their opinion, the 477R. And then some special considerations if the firm is subject to other regulations like HIPAA or GLBA, or if they do work across the country and are subject to places like California's Privacy Act or Europeans Data Protection Act or things like that. We ended up with way too many questions, but trying to attack it broadly and narrow it down, but really for cyber attacks, focusing on the things that, encryption, multi-factor authentication, good passwords, training people not to click on things, and having good controls around wire fraud seem to be the broader areas that can help. I will say I didn't discuss this so much with the group, but when we at Lawyers Mutual were updating policies, the NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, developed a model data security law that several states have adopted now for insurance companies. And it uses some very broad language in terms of what should be part of an information security program. And that may be something to look at to help in wording anything that we do, to keep things very general that are scalable from that solo without an office up to a large firm.
All right, thanks, Patrick. Any questions or comments for Patrick? This area may be the one that scares folks the most. It perhaps gets the most attention.
And the problem is you will not prevent a cyber attack if somebody wants to get in. That's not possible. It's trying to avoid being that low-hanging fruit, try to make it more difficult so they pass on you and go to the next person that may not have those security measures in place.
Brian Fox said the same thing. He said it's the concept of being in Alaska and being attacked by a grizzly bear, and you only need to outrun the guy next to you.
I see I mentioned blaming Peter Bolak for something, and he's on the call now, so.
It did not go unnoticed.
All right, if we just note that, Leonore, for the minutes. All right. Okay, any other questions or comments on cyber attacks? All right, we'll move to marketing then. Who's the spokesperson on marketing?
I will be the spokesperson. Feel like we're coming in as the last group and then have sort of interesting, maybe philosophical issues that we need to address. Part of it is that it's very difficult to market something that we don't really know what it is. So that was problem number one in the group. Problem number two was, how are people going to be incentivized to complete this survey? I don't think telling people you'll do better if you take this survey is really going to do much for them. And so those are the two questions I think that Patty Warren and I sort of struggled with before we can even get out of the gate. So I leave that to the group. I think these are great ideas. I think that it's a great concept in general, but I'm not sure exactly who we're targeting. I'm not sure how we get them incentivized to fill out a questionnaire. So I guess I have more than a report. I have a sort of a litany of questions Because again, I think we all agree that conceptually it's great. And then hearing everyone talk today about their questions and their ideas, these are all crucial issues that lawyers should be tackling. And frankly, from my perspective, it feels like a disservice that we're putting it all in a questionnaire and not incentivizing it to get people to participate. And so I had emailed, I think, Walter and Eben after we had our meeting earlier, maybe about a month ago, to let them know where we had ended. And so I think, I know Warren and Patty will chime in if they have anything else to say, but that was sort of the summary of what we concluded at our meeting.
I've never known Warren to be at a loss for words. Warren, can you not take it off mute? Is that what the problem is?
There we go. I've been very diligently trying to think of acronyms during all this, because you got to start with an acronym. I was trying to come up with something for spinach, so we could be like "Eat Your Spinach" could be our tagline. Survey for prevention of computer hacking or something like that was good. Another one with law office self-assessment questionnaire. Get your office low-sacked. So some other ones that I'm spinning here, but you know, I think at core, we really have to have a hard conversation about incentives to make this successful. And if we're not doing it as a CLE and doing it as a questionnaire, you know, what is the incentive? You know, we had to give the incentive to make everybody take CLE was to say you can't keep practicing law if you don't take CLE, right? So we created a stick to get you to do it. I think we've all agreed that this needs to be a carrot, but we got to come up with what that carrot is. So anyway, carrot. There's another one. Maybe I'll work with that one, see if I can come up with another acronym with carrot.
Hey, Warren, some of the other continuing education that I have to do, they'll give you like an hour of credit for completing certain surveys or tasks. I wonder if there were to be a way to, you know, get your tech hour for the year, if there was a way to track it, to encourage people to fill that out.
Yeah,
tracking would be the hard thing.
Yeah, then that, you know, kind of gets in the, who gets the credit? Does every lawyer in the office get an hour of tech credit? Because one of the lawyers took the law office, you know, so I don't know. Anyway, lots of good questions there, I think.
But I want you to know that we're very enthusiastic about marketing this wonderful program that everybody's putting so much into. We just have some practical questions about how we go about it. And I think Catherine is right. First of all, we need to know what our product is. And so we sort of said, how do we start marketing it until we get the final product? But we're excited about doing something to further this. We just need to know what and how we can get lawyers to do it. I think that was the bottom line.
I hate to
right,
bring
Catherine?
Warren,
I was just gonna say, go ahead, Mac. Sorry.
Warren, have you decided that you're not willing to give discounts on rates?
Oh, discounts on premiums?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, I would think there needs to be a sort of if that was to be in the cards, it isn't going to come through me. There needs to be a contingent of the higher ups at Lawyers Mutual and the higher ups at the State Bar come together in a summit meeting and decide what they can and can't do. But yeah, that's a possibility. You're right, Matt. It's not to get political, but you know, it's kind of like we could market it like Trump's healthcare plan. It's the best thing ever, but it doesn't exist yet. That's what I thought. It was pretty good.
Hey, I will tell the committee that I've been in contact with our local Mecklenburg County Bar Association. I was on an hour-long PLE a couple weeks ago, and I talked to them about doing an hour on this particular topic and the PMBR and what the state bar is doing. I did put a call into Brian Focht, and he's not called me. So Patrick, if I can't get Brian, can I get you to volunteer to meet for an hour lunch and learn is what we call it here by Zoom?
Sure, be happy to help out however I can.
All right, I'll take you up on that if Brian doesn't back. So, but I really kind of wanted to publicize this and talk about, and give some props to the state bar and what we're doing to earn everybody annual.
Well, I think Catherine has raised sort of the fundamental question about PMBR. It's not so much an issue for this, this particular working group to try to come up with a cybersecurity self-assessment tool, but it goes to the very notion of PMBR and how do you incentivize that. I know we've all been to the presentations, and Eben, I guess I'll defer to you to talk about how we can conceptually think about the process of incentivizing and PMBR as opposed to something that's a CLE requirement or any other alternatives.
Well, the two models we have, Illinois and Colorado, one is voluntary, one is mandatory for those that don't have malpractice insurance up in Illinois. And I think the way we ended up, and as everybody knows, the PMBR committee was a long march through a dozen or more meetings last year. And it took us a while to get our arms around the concepts and what we had in place here that basically met a lot of the topics and issues that were identified in both Colorado and Illinois. But once again, we talked about CLE versus self-assessment tool. The CLE kind of lives in its own silo and has its own rules, and we talked about stepping on the toes of other CLE providers that receive income for CLE participation. So it's a gnarly issue. Lawyers are notoriously like herding cats, and it's going to be. I agree with Catherine. It's to get somebody to voluntarily spend an hour of their time with no carrot at the end of it is going to be difficult, but I don't think impossible. I think what we need to do is work towards a product here. And if we do feel like we have a workable and meaningful product, then the last piece of the discussion will be how do we market it? How do we incentivize lawyers to participate in this? But it's if this product prevents a dozen or 24 lawyers each year from getting hacked or getting having money stolen or having ransomware, that protects the public, and that sort of is the prime directive here, is protection of the public, and that's where we, that's our mission, and that's how we ought to couch it.
I think it's also helpful to remember the survey and go back to sort of the basic reason why we're talking. And the survey indicated that lawyers overwhelmingly won't help on this topic. And so maybe there's an appetite out there, and all we need to do is feed it and figure out a way to feed it in a way that's productive and helpful to them. And so I'm with you, Evan. We know that that Catherine can't sell a product that we don't have made yet. But, you know, Apple said we create demand. We don't meet demand, we create it. So maybe we can do a little bit of that too. Yes, Mac.
I do think it's important that whatever we do, the rollout of this is as good as possible. We don't want to roll out a program that doesn't get any kind of interest or uptake by the bar and then try to fix it later. We really need to think this one through carefully and roll it out in a positive, strong manner.
Well said. Yeah. We all remember the debacle of the rollout of Obamacare. Yeah. Okay. Well, it seems to me, and Evan, you help me here. It seems to me the next step is for us to encourage each of the working groups to come up with, you know, specific questions and perhaps sub questions and references for their various topics. And then we had talked about exchanging those. So maybe the next meeting have pare it down to some essential questions that each of the groups want to make sure are included. And maybe, you know, we don't have to pare it down too far because we can eliminate things. It's easier to eliminate as we go through the process, I think, than to add. Don't worry about, as we've discussed today, don't worry about overlap with other groups. And let's start learning. Let's start learning how we're going to make this work and get those questions down and start circulating. What do you think, Evan? You're still on mute.
Yeah, I unmuted. Thanks, Walter.
Yeah.
Walter and I will report to the executive committee, I guess, next week. This is an ongoing process, and I agree. I think that the next step is to try to cast as wide a net in each subgroup as we can with questions, and also identify ties to rules of professional conduct and ethical opinions, and then have a secondary tie to any secondary sources that may help educate. I don't know, as Catherine says, I don't know how deep lawyers will get into it once they get into it, but it ought to be there for them. But my suggestion is craft some questions, identify links to rules of professional conduct and ethics opinions, and then identify any links to secondary sources that can help educate. Mac?
Question. Brian, do you have some from the other states that you could send out, just 2 or 3 questions, references, and citations, so we've got a model that we could all try to shoot for?
Yeah, I can send out the at least just a portion of the Colorado self-assessment. That might be helpful. Theirs is rather well, I guess a bit more detailed as far as not just the question, but also the resources that are relevant to the question. But Wyoming just came out with a self-assessment tool in the past, I feel like it was probably the past 6 months or so. That's very simple, straightforward, but I'll get that and I'll send that to the committee after this meeting, so you guys can have some PDFs to take a look at.
And I guess to the subcommittee members, you know, Brian and Leonore will be sort of backstop if people call with connections to rules and ethics opinions and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. We're happy to help. We want to, like we said in the email, want the working groups to be able to utilize their strengths, their perspectives. But you know, if there's something, just kind of a clarification, you're looking for an ethics opinion that you know is out there, instead of, you know, taking an hour to search for it, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll be happy to help you out there.
And
So Brian-
particularly for the money group, if you have questions about trust account management and the rules and what governs in that area, please definitely reach out.
So Brian, if you and Leonore could help me and Evan to construct a follow-up email that'll give some guidance to our working groups and include those materials all together, I think that will be helpful. All right.
So I guess let me ask one question. Is it the consensus of the group that this is worth going forward on? Is everybody willing to roll up their sleeves and continue this work?
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, thank you to everybody for the work on this. I know we're plowing new ground. I can't say that enough, but we'll figure it out as we go. And thanks so much for your help today. I see we're past the 1 hour mark, and so we want to respect everybody's time. Wish you all a good weekend. Evan, any closing remarks from you?
No, just thanks to everybody. This is not easy stuff, and it's going to be a journey through the weeds and thickets and of this stuff, and we'll get it right.
All right. Everybody have a great weekend. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.